Thank you very much for leaving us. It's a big honor, it's a big cover to come to share Torah. Not such a short notice, but I'm happy to come out all the way to Brooklyn from the 5 towns, and hopefully we'll be able to learn tonight. I was asked to speak about the Indian of visiting Kivrei Tzadikim, visiting the graves of our Tzadikim, our Torah leaders, combined with the idea of what exactly are we saying, what are we davening for, what are we talking about when we visit Kivrei Tzadikim. There are some more over there, it's one over there, but we'll hand out the source sheets and let's begin. The major source regarding visiting the graves of Tzadikim is the Gemara in Sosan Daf Lamed Daled. The Gemara says, "Vayalu b'negeb v'yavo et Hebron." When Kalev and the Meraglim came into Eretz Yisrael to spy on that unfortunate mission and to see what was going on in Eretz Yisrael, it says "Vayavo mibayilei." It shouldn't say that he came to Hebron. It should say they came to Hebron. Apparently, someone was by themselves. Amar Rabba Melamed Shepirish Kalev Matzis Regalim v'Halach Nishatech Kivrei Avos. We see here, says the Gemara, that why is it in the singular form, not the plural form? Because Kalev left the rest of the group and he went to daven by himself in Hebron by the Maras Machpel. Amar Lahem. What did he say there? Avosai, my fathers. Big Shoalai Rachman, please request for me mercy. That I should be saved from the advice, the plans of the Meraglim. And this is the earliest source we have, that someone goes to a grave where somebody is buried and davens to who, we'll talk about in a second, but davens to something there asking for some sort of help. The Minchas Allah, the Rebbe Munkach, has a long shoot about the Sigil. We'll quote from a number of times tonight in Chelak Alf and Simin Sanaches, and he says this is the source that we go to Kivrei Tzadikim, whether it's in New York or they're out in Staten Island or in other places across America or Eretz Yisrael or Europe. This is the source we see from Kalev. The question we're going to have to talk about later on is, what are we saying here? But first, let's talk about the Indian to go to the Beis HaKvaros itself. The Gemara in Tainus, and Daf Tazayin, has another source in Chazal, not all the way from Tanakh, but a source in Chazal that they would go to the Beis HaKvaros. It says that on a Tainus Tzibor, they would go out to the cemetery. Lama Yotz in the Beis HaKvaros. Why would they go to the cemetery on a fast day? Pligi Bar Rabbi Levi Bar Chama Rabbi Chanina. Chanamar 1 says, we want to show Kadosh Baruch Hu. It's as if we're mason. It's as if we're dead before you. Hashem, we have nothing left. There's no rain. There's a tzara. Things are terrible. Hashem, we're mason. We're nothing in front of you. No, we're going there to ask the dead who are already there buried for mercy upon us. This chaps a nafkamina. The Gemara says, what's the nafkamina? The nafkamina is, can you go to a Beis HaKvaros of a guy? According to the first opinion, it's just as effective to go to the non-Jewish cemetery than the Jewish cemetery, because all you need to show is a place where people are dead, irregardless Jew or non-Jew. There is a Bach. The Bach in the halachos of Kishuf and being Darshal and Mason in Yeridea recites a girs of a Gemara that we do not have in our Gemaras. Let's see what the Bach brings from a Gemara in Sota Daf Yudal. Al Maisa Pa'or v'Amar Rav Chama Rachanina b'Pnei Man Nistater Kibro Shamos Shem Einei Bas Radam. The age-old question: why is it that we don't know where Moshe Rabbeinu is buried? Not only do we not know, it is specifically hidden. It is kept from us, and we know there's all the time people saying, "Oh, I'm in the Sinai Desert. I found the place where Moses was buried." The Christians are looking, the Jews are looking. Why is it that it was kept from us exactly where Moshe is buried? So this Gemara that is not in our standard printing, but is in some printing, says, because Hashem knew. This is appropriate for the period that we are in. In the future, the Beis HaMikdash should be destroyed. And we would be sent into Galus. We will run to the grave of Moshe Rabbeinu. We will cry, we will supplicate the Moshe. But Yomer Alone will say, Moshe Rabbeinu, get up and daven for us. And Moshe will daven from his kever, and he will stop the gzeir of going into Galus. Because the tzaddikim are more beloved in their death than they are when they are alive. So I'll ask the question, isn't that what we want though? So there's other implications of going into Galus. It's the Ras Hashem, we should be in Galus for whatever reason it is. and therefore Hashem did not want that we should go to the kever of Moshe and David. So we see a third source of the importance of the idea of going to Kivrei Tzadikim. The Psikta Rabasi, the Bereshis Rabbah, notes that Yaakov buried his wife Rachel in Beis Lechem. Why? So when the Jewish people would be leaving Eretz Yisrael going to Galus, we would then go and stop by Kever Rachel and daven to Mama Rachel, asking her to daven on behalf of Hashem, calling us back home. In fact, they say that Rechaim Shmulevitz, when he would go, Rechaim Shmulevitz had a very special connection, very special kesher to Kever Rachel. When Rechaim Shmulevitz would come to the kever of Rachel Imenu, which he would frequent quite often, he would walk in and say, Mama Rachel, your Chaimka is here, your little Chaim is here, and I've come to talk. That he viewed this as a place where he could talk directly to Rachel Imenu and engage in such a heartfelt tefillah. The Zohar in Parshas Achrei Mos describes how we need the Rachamim to go to Kivrei Tzadikim and cry, because doing so awakens the neshama, says the Zohar HaKadosh, and causes them to go before Hashem and daven. Now, we're going to discuss, as we said, two separate issues at play. Is it right to go to Kivrei Tzadikim? And if it is right, what are we saying? Let's first discuss the inyan of going to the kever itself. The Mishnah Berurah in Siman Taf Kuf Nun Tes, by the halachos of Tisha B'Av, writes, and he's quoting the Magen Avraham, who is also quoting a Ber Heitev, who is quoting the Arizal in the Sharuach HaKodesh. Rav Chaim Vital asked his Rebbe, the Arizal, about going to a cemetery to ask for mechila, meaning somebody offended somebody, spoke lashon hara about somebody who was nifter, and they felt they needed to go ask for mechila from the person they spoke lashon hara about. So the Talmud asked the Arizal, is it proper to go to the Beis HaKvaros, to the cemetery, to ask for mechila? So the Arizal said, whoa, you're asking the wrong question. You shouldn't be asking about asking for mechila. The question you should be asking is it right to go to the Beis HaKvaros in the first place? So the Arizal said, the only time you should go to Beis HaKvaros is to make sure that you are more than 4 amos, 6 to 8 feet away from the kever itself. You should never get too close to the kever when you go there. Aval lo al kivros mamish, not mamish by the kever. We see people, they go in there, they're lying on the kever, they're hugging the kever, all these things. Says,
I'm saying anybody goes to the
okay, so not
you jumping from cave to cave.
So not on the kever, he says. Oh, safe, dal amos away. Why? Because there are negative spirits. There's a negative spiritual aspect that clings to the person when they come too close to the kever. So it says the Arizal to the Talmud, you want to go to Beis HaKvaros? Okay, that's fine, but not too close. There's a spiritual reality, a negative spiritual reality that affects the person, and therefore you need to be very careful not to get too close. Writes the Aruch HaShulchan, Michil Mechlevstein, the Rav in Navarre, the contemporary of the Chavetz Chaim. So he says, "V'Harizal ein zaito nochel elachal kvaros." He was not a fan of going to the Beis HaKvaros. Now he doesn't qualify. The Aruch HaShulchan doesn't say Dal Amos. He says the Arizal didn't like going to the Beis HaKvaros, Zulas and Levayas Ames, except for a funeral. Then you have to. That's a mitzvah. Being Melava Ames is a mitzvah. You have to go. Afilu Kivrei Yisrael, even a Jewish kever, Kiyesh L'Chosh Yid B'Gvol Chitzonim. Sorry, I skipped again. Kar Kasu Asher Sheholchem B'Chaburos Umasichin Sichos B'Telos Yosef Toshaleh. So it says the Aruch HaShulchan, I hear there are people, they get groups together and they go to the cemetery and there's Sicha B'Telos there. They're schmoozing and schmying around the cemetery. That's not appropriate. You go to the Beis HaKvaros when you need to go to the Beis HaKvaros. It's not a hangout place. It's not a place you go just to have a fun Chalamoid trip. You go to the Beis HaKvaros for a mitzvah, but not to do other things there, says the Aruch HaShulchan. The Vilna Gaon has a letter to his family that he wrote supposedly before he was going to make Aliyah on his trip that didn't work out. So writes the Gra to his family. Don't go to the cemetery. Now, in some girsos, it says in the parentheses here, Shisham Mistadkim HaKlipos Ma'od V'Koshakim B'Nashim. There, the klipos, the negative spiritual entities, will come close to, especially by women. They should be careful. All types of tsaros and difficulties come to a person because they spend too much time in the Beis HaKvaros. The minhag of the Soloveitchik family, coming back to the Vilna Gaon, Rabbi Shachar records this in Nefesh Harav, that Rabbi Soloveitchik was against going to the Beis HaKvaros in general, and this is a Masorah from his father and his grandfather Ruchaim, going all the way back to Lanagon. You don't go to the cemetery unless you have a reason to go there, but not time to go and to do nothing there. That's a mitzvah. Even for Kivrei Avos, the Salvation family would not even go visit the kever of their parents because they felt it was so negative to go there if it wasn't a reason. We'll get to this opinion in a moment. Rabbi Soloveitchik, however, did make an exception. Rabbi Soloveitchik was very close with his wife, and a very, very loving and a very profound marriage. And Rabbi Soloveitchik's wife passed away relative early in their marriage, and took him a long time to get over it. Rabbi Soloveitchik kind of broke with family tradition because he had the need. He felt he needed to go to the Beis HaKvaros to go talk to his wife and go have that nechama over there. But as a rule, the Soloveitchik family coming from the Vilna Gaon did not go to the Beis HaKvaros. The Minchas Lazar says, no. Kivrei Tzadikim is a mitzvah. It's a mitzvah to go there. And the Arizal wouldn't have an issue with davening. The Arizal's talking about a case of, just going there and hanging around and making a barbecue and doing nothing else. But if you're going to go and daven there, says the Minchas Lazar, certainly. So obviously we see off the bat, we have a chiluk here between Chasidim and Misnagdim. We have the Mishabur, the Aruch HaShulchan, the Vilna Gaon, the Salvation family on one side saying, Beis HaKvaros is not a place to go. You have the Minchas Lazar and other people we'll see in a moment saying, no, it's a mitzvah to go to Kivrei Tzadikim. Moshe finds as a Tshuva Yeridea in Chelik Beis, where he says that there's no concern to visit Kivrei Avos, because going to visit the kever of parents is Kibud Av Beim, and therefore it's a mitzvah, and therefore it would not be an issue even according to the Arizal.
How often is that?
How often is what?
Should you go visit parents? It's a mitzvah to go.
However much however much it would not be a burden on the child. I don't think it would be any different than the parent was alive. A child has to go to a certain extent to honor their parents, visit them, take care of them. But it doesn't mean they have to, lose a parnasa, they have to lose money, whatever. This isn't a reason for the parents to go. So,
what's the mechanics of it? Meaning now that you have a mitzvah to go, now there's no harmful spirits, or it's negated?
Is that when there's a mitzvah, there's no harmful spirits. There's no klipos, there's no chitzonim
So it doesn't exist.
when you're going there for a mitzvah. That seems to be the mechanics. Good. So let's turn now to the next question. Being Doresh al HaMesim, says the Torah in Sefer Devarim, Parak Yud Ches, Lo yimatzu b'cha ma'avir b'nu v'yitzav v'eish, you shouldn't go worship Molech and put your children through the fire, Kosem, Kesamim, Ma'onim, Menachesh, Mechashiv, all these types of superstitious Avodah Zarah type of practices. V'chover chaver, Shoel Ovi Yidoni, the Doresh al HaMesim, says the Torah. You should not be Doresh al HaMesim, to go and inquire, talk to the dead. That's what the Torah says. A Jew should not go and do that. Now, what does that mean to Doresh al HaMesim? So the Minchas Lazar, who clearly wants us to go visit the Beis HaKvaros, quotes the Gemara in Sanhedrin Daf Samachay, says, "V'harayiv atzma, one who makes themselves hungry, v'holech v'lan, they go and sleep at Beis HaKvaros, k'dei shetisha alav ruach tamah." A person goes to Beis HaKvaros because they want to use, so to speak, the dark side, tuma, negative spirituality, to go and have some sort of koach, some sort of understanding of the future, some sort of negative spiritual aspect. So says the Gemara Sanhedrin, that's what it means to be Doresh al HaMesim. But says the Minchas Lazar, going to daven by Kivrei Tzadikim is not being Doresh al HaMesim. Let's see if everybody agrees to that. The next question is, what are we doing at a Beis HaKvaros? What is the ma'ila? What do you get out of it? You daven in a beautiful shul here. So you daven Shemona Esrei here, you say Tehillim here, you learn Torah here. What's the plus by davening in a Beis HaKvaros by a tzaddik than you have by davening in a Beis HaKnesses? So the Ran, Rabbeinu Nisim, one of the great Rishonim, has a collection of very important drashos. The drashos Haran are a must that people should get into learning, try to understand the hashkapas ha'chaim of the Rishonim. I think ArtScroll has begun to translate the drashos Haran. So if that Hebrew is a barrier, go and pick up your copy. I don't work for ArtScroll. I'm just saying you should be learning the drashos Haran. So in Drush Ches, the Ran says as follows: Be'amtzos hanavim v'chasidim yushba shefa chol bnei dora. A tzaddik brings shefa, brings blessing into that generation. V'gam acharei mosam, even after their death. Mekomos kuroseim ru'iyim limatzeh shefa. You can find the shefa, the bracha of a tzaddik, even where they're buried. B'tzad min atzdadim. Ki atzmoseim asher kvarhu kelim l'chol aleim shefa. The tzaddik purifies his body and becomes a kli, a receptacle for the kedusha of HaKadosh Baruch Hu to come into him. Hashem Eloki Adai Nishar Behem Hamala. Whatever kedusha that tzaddik attained in his guf, in his body when he was alive, so that, so to speak, remains with the tzaddik even after he's dead. Therefore, Chazal say it's good to daven by Kivrei Tzadikim, because the tefillah in such a place is much more receptive. Now, just to be clear here, I'm not saying that because a person was a tzaddik and they were kadosh, that there's no tumah by their grave. That is a shiur for another time regarding our Kivrei Tzadikim Matame. And the answer to that question is yes. That's the short answer to a longer shiur. The answer is yes. But what we're saying is that kedusha is not the opposite of tumah. Tahara is the opposite of tumah. It is a holy place by Kivrei Tzadik, but it doesn't mean there's not tumah. There's not a contradiction to one another. Now, what about the Gemara in Sota that says that Kalev daven by the Avos? Is that not a violation of being Darash al Amesim, going and talking to the dead? So the Maram Shik has a Tshuva Orachaim in Siman Shin Reish Sadi Gimel, and he says that the Gemara in Avodah Zarah tells us that when Rabbi Elazar ben Dordai was about to die, we're not going to get into the Rabbi Elazar ben Dordai right now, but he was a person who did terrible averos, and in the last moments of his life, he did tshuva in a very intense way. And in the moments of his final tshuva, Rabbi Elazar ben Dordai said to the mountains, I'm speaking to the heavens, I'm speaking to the mountains, asking them to beseech Hashem on his behalf. So says the Maram Shek. I understand. Rabbi Elazar ben Dordai is a fool. He's talking to mountains. He's talking to clouds. Like, what does that mean? So he says, when the Gemara says that Rabbi Elazar ben Dordai is talking to the mountains, what it means is that he is expressing the pain over his process of tshuva. It's like anguish, like a person, it's taking a person's nailing something into the wall, and they hit their finger, and they say something they're not supposed to say. So they don't mean to say it. They're just so overcome with coursing pain through their thumb that they just burst something out. So he says the same thing over here. It was just an expression. The mountains should daven to me. But he didn't actually mean the mountains are going to daven to HaKadosh Baruch Hu on his behalf. It's an expression. So too, when Kalev said he was davening to the Avos, he was expressing his intense feelings of pain over what was going on with his compatriots over there who were trying to sell out Bnei Israel and to speak Lashon Hara about the land of Israel. He expressed his feel in a way, whereas it's as if he was talking to the Avos. That's what the Maram Shik says. Another approach from the Maram Shik is that he was asking the Avos to be a Melitz Yosher, an expression we use quite often, that they should be an intermediary, a go-between us and the Kadosh Baruch Hu. That those like Malachei Rachamim. That's a shir also for another time. Talking to Malachim, Machnise Rachamim by Rosh Hashanah. But there as well, there'd be to be an intermediary. A third approach is in the Tshuvas Avnei Yashar. Avnei Yashar is Rabbi Yisrael Pesach Feinham, who was a great Talmud Chacham and Tzaddik in Eretz Yisrael. So he writes in Chelek Aleph that he has an issue with the Gemaras as well. And he says that the very visiting of the cemetery causes tzaddikim to be meilitz tov on our behalf. Meaning, you don't have to say a word. When you walk in to a Beis HaKadosh where tzaddikim are buried, immediately they begin to talk on behalf of Klal Yisrael and Shemayim. He says, if you look at the Gemara, it doesn't say that Kalev davened to them for Hav Rachmanas. It says that he went to Maras Machpelah so that it would cause them to be Mevakesh Rachamim. Kalev didn't say a word. He simply walked in and they started davening. Rosh Hashanah writes in Shuvas Hanagos and Chelik Beis, he suggests that Kalev wanted to be Mevakesh Rachamim. And he went to the Kivrei Yavos and he laid out the facts. He said, Mom and Dad, Avram and Sarah, I have issues going on. I'm not going to tell you what to do, but this is what's going on in my life, and you guys pick up the ball and run with it. But he's not davening to them to do anything or to be as if he's davening to a Kadosh Baruch Hu. Now the Maram Shik says, and you would think for the Maram Shik, that the Maram Shik is against going to Kivrei Tzadikim. But he says, ideally, when you go, you should speak to the Tzadikim as a Melitz Yosher, as an intermediary, go between you and a Kadosh Baruch Hu. And he says that this is Iker Tefillah Tzarech Lios Neged Hashem. When you daven to Hashem. Hopefully we all know that. When you daven to Hashem. Nevertheless, he says, There's a long-standing minhag, and what can I do? Of people going to the Beis HaKvaros, going to Kivrei Tzadikim, and talking directly to the Tzadikim at the end of the day. So let's explain exactly the Shitas HaPoskim of what do we say. You are, Ezras Hashem, Eretz Yisrael is opening up, you'll get in a flight, and you'll go to Maras Machpelah, and you go to Tiberia, and you'll go to Tzfas and Meron, and you'll daven by Kivrei Tzadikim, a big suchus. So what are you going to be saying when you go there? What's your expression? What's your tefillah when you go to those places? So let's go in two directions. So just to bring that first topic together, the Shulchan Aruch writes in Hilchos Yom Kippur, in Hilchos Tanios, and in Hilchos Tishuv. In three places, the Shulchan Aruch says the minhag to go to Kvarim. So we agree at the end of the day, we go to Kvarim Zayin. How close you should get? So perhaps you should stay, Dalet Amos away. There are two approaches. The first approach we're going to discuss right now is that we don't daven to the Mesim, we daven to a Kadosh Baruch Hu to give us rachamim, mercy, in the zechus of the tzaddikim. Davening to the Mesim would be, as we'll see in a moment, karov l'davar of being darash al Mesim. You're right. I'm not actually violating one of the 613 mitzvos being darash al Mesim. But, say many of the poskim, it's a little too close for comfort. It makes me feel icky that maybe it's something like being darash al Mesim. The Ber Heitev cites the Maharil in the Drashos in Hilchos Tainis, who says there was a minhag to go to Kivrei Tzadikim on a Tainis. However, says the Maharil, Gedorei Chachmei Ashkenaz. We go because of the Makam Kadosh V'Tahor, like the Ran, to go to Admas Kodesh. And one must be careful to not direct the tefillos towards the Mesim. Rather, Yevakesh Meis Hashem Yisbarach, She'iten Elav Rachamim, B'Zchus HaTzadikim Shochnei Afar. That I daven to Hashem, that He should answer my tefillos in the merit of the tzaddikim who are buried in this place. And this is cited in Eliyahu Rabbah, the Eliyahu Zuta, those Svarim as well. The Bach and Yeredeya, the Shach and the Behetev cited Shuvah of Rav Chaim Paltiel. Who's Rav Chaim Paltiel? The Maharam Rothenberg, one of the great pillars of Chachmei Ashkenaz. You know the story. He was kept in jail towards the end of his life as a ransom. He had very chashuv talmidim. The Rosh, Rabbeinu Asher, was one of his talmidim. But he had another talmid, Rav Chaim Paltiel. Rav Chaim Paltiel is more known for his Perish and Chumash. But we have a tshuva, we have a ksav yad of Rav Chaim Paltiel, and he wrote as follows: Al hanodrim leilech lebeis hakvaros ksas. People would make a neder, a pledge, to go to the Beis HaKvaros. Hayanira kedarash al Mesim. It looks like as if it's being darash al Mesim. The kalav shnishatecha kivrei avos. Hisvalel l'shem b'makom kedusha kedei shitzet tfilas u'nishmas. He davened there not because he was talking to Avraham and Yaakov, so Rachel, and Chava and Leah and Rivka. He davened there because he wanted their tefillos to be heard, because that was a good place to daven. It says by Avraham Avinu, El hamakom esher amad sham al hamakom garim. Where you daven matters. It matters where you daven. Hopefully we're past this point. But if there's still, outdoor minyanim going on or house minyanim going on, it matters where you daven. A house minyan and an outdoor minyan is eno domed to a minyan in a Beis HaKnesses. Daven in a shul makom tefillah el arina ve'al tefillah, a place where the walls are saturated with tefillos of people, is a much more effective davening. Your tefillos will be heard much better when you daven in a Beis HaKnesses, in the Beis HaMedrash, versus an outdoor minyan or in the basement or somebody's house. Daven in a shul. So a kever of a tzaddik is ki'ilu, not exactly, but in some way it's a makam kadosh to daven there as well, says Rav Chaim Paltiel. And he says, V'davku shatech al kivrei avos. He says that's by kivrei avos. It was palal lefanu bisparach al kodsara. Shlo tavo b'schus avosav hanikbaram pa. You go to the place of the tzaddik where he's buried. Then in the merit of the tzaddik being buried here, that will be able to help my tefillos be accepted. Uchayotze b'zeh kvar niktanu sidrei atfilah mishtachim al kivrei avos. Says Rav Chaim Paltiel, go down by Kivrei Avos. Have a great time. I'm not telling you not to go. But if you go, behave responsibly. Do it the right way. Don't daven to tzaddikim who are dead. That's usher. The Maharal, in his Nesiv Olam, in the Nesiv Avodah, says this is the issue with Machnise Rachim and Slichos, and he says it's improper to daven to Malachim and things like that. And he says when it comes to Kivrei Tzaddikim, we're joining together with the Mason. Maharal says it's like a tag team in wrestling. You're going to daven, the tzaddik's going to daven, and together, my tefillos and his tefillos together are going to be effective and allowed to be together. Two's better than one, but I'm not davening to the tzaddik. The tzaddik's davening along with me. We're working together to have effective tefillos. The mesim daven with us as a chesed, no different than having your friend daven for you. A person's having surgery, you're going to daven, I'm going to daven, we'll both daven together, and the tefillah will be accepted. The chayadim in two places, right? And again, the chachmas adam, via nizar ma'od shelo yasim agmasel isfal kadosh baruch hu shiasa levakesh hamesim shekar v'darvish yevdechal dorish al hamesim chesed b'schus tzadikim hamesim. You don't daven to the dead, says the chayadim. Says Rav from Danzig, you daven to a kadosh baruch hu and the zechus of the hamesim are there. That is shita number one. We're clear so far on this? We understand this approach? Good. Let's go over to the other side. There is a school of thought that agrees that one who goes to the Beis Tzadikim davens directly and speaks to the neshama of the person who is buried there. And it is not simply being a Melitz Yosher. The Pri Megadim and Arachaim and Sim Tavkuf Peyal cites Elia Rabbah, who quotes the Maharil. And then the Pri Megadim says, I'm well aware of what the Maharil says, not to daven to the neshama that's there, but there's a sefer called the Siddur Ma'aneh Lashon, which is a collection of tefillos, and the tefillah to be said by the Kvarim seem to say that you're davening directly to the nifter to daven to HaKadosh Baruch Hu on our behalf. You're davening to the nifter. The Minchas Elazar has a lengthy tshuva we've spoken about already, and he quotes Mamari Chazal, and he quotes the Gemara in Tainis Taf Chav Gimel. The Gemara in Tainis Chav Gimel quotes Rav Mani bar Rav Yonah, who was persecuted by members of the family of the Nasi. The family of the Nasi was not a fan of this Rav Mani bar Rav Yonah, and he went to the grave of his father, and he said to him, Avi, Avi, my father, they're persecuting me. And on those day, those people were persecuting him, their legs got stuck in the grave, and their horses became stuck in the ground, and they were makabel of themselves not to persecute him anymore. The Gemara in Chagiga, Sota, Barachos, who speak about Tzadikim who went to Kivrei Tzadikim, and to ask them questions in order to alleviate their problems, all types of stories over there. These are not exactly tefillos, but there's an idea of pleading directly to the neshama of the tzaddik or the person there in order they should answer you and your tefillos. And the Minchas Elazar says, you can speak to the mace. He says, I have no problem with it at all. And when the Maharil says talking to the mace means, that you don't talk to them, he's against the idea that the mace has some sort of power to protect. When we go to Beis HaKvaros, we go to the Tzadikim, I don't think, whoever's kever you want to go to, I don't think that the Arizal is the one who's going to go and be Poel and act in Shemayim. The Arizal is going to do something with the Kadosh Baruch Hu, tell Hashem, go and do what I need to happen. But I don't think the Arizal is Elokus, that there's godliness to the Arizal, says the Minchas Elazar. That's Kfira. That's something you can't do. We know that our Kadosh Baruch Hu runs the world. But I can talk to the Arizal, I can talk to Rav Moshe Feinstein, I can talk to whatever it is, and have that person, that neshama, go and act on our behalf. And that would be okay. Even the Maharil would agree to this. The Sefer Chasidim in Siman Tafnun says that Barzeh Hagiladi, the supporter of David HaMelech, asked that if you return to V'amus Ba'ari, I want to die in my city. And the reason is that the minig of the deceased, the family of the deceased comes to the kever, and they're mavaksha al nishmasam. They daven for the neshama of the person. And they daven to them there that they should have goodness in the world, just like Kalev went to Kivrei Yavos. The Ben Ishchai Parshas Nitzavim says that when going to Kivrei the Tzaddik, we don't daven to the deceased, we daven to the Hashem for rachamim. But then he says, "V'yachol shatech al Kivrei Tzaddik." But Yomer, you should say, "Hareini mevakesh mi nefesh Tzaddik hakavor peh." I ask the neshama of the tzaddik who's buried here, shetispal alai lifnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu, kach v'kach. Then I'm going to daven to the tzaddik who's there. They should daven me, go to Hashem, so and so. So the Ben Ishchai also says you talk directly to the tzaddik. The Darchei Tshuva, the grandson, the grandfather of the Minchas Elazar, the grandfather of Minchas Elazar, I forgot which one. So here, what? Grandfather? Great. The grandfather of Minchas Elazar, he sees no issue with asking for neshamas for rachamim, since you're only asking them to be a Melitz Yosher, and the Gesher Achaim, Reb Chil Nechutz HaKachinsky, the B'Tzel HaChachma, the Yavi Omer of Aj Yosef Nechelet Daled, and other places as well, all say you can talk directly to the neshama when you go and daven there. So we have here a good old-fashioned Chlokas HaPoskim, what to say when you go to the Beis HaKaros, when you go to the Tzadikim. I'm not here to pass them for you. That's why you have a local Orthodox rabbi. But these are the two issues that are set up in front of you in order to decide what to say at that time. There's whole discussions in Minchas HaShuva about Piskos, putting a Pesach by the kever itself, and what exactly, why is it not an issue of Lord the Rush mocking the dead? All those types of things are discussed in other areas as well. I want to talk about one more point as we come to a close. This will tie into going to Kivrei Tzadikim. Yes, you're allowed to go to the kever of a tzaddik. We agree to that. But is it a mitzvah? Is it a mitzvah to go to Kivrei Tzadikim to daven there? Or is it just a nice thing to do? So the answer to this could be found in the Stei Chemed of Chizkiyahu Medina, the great Rav in Turkey. So he writes here in the Mareches Eretz Yisrael, in the column we have here at the end. He says, Eretz Yisrael de'asur l'tzeis mena l'chutz la'aretz. It's asur to leave Eretz Yisrael to go to chutz la'aretz. That is a din in the Rambam, in the Gemara. You can't leave Eretz Yisrael to go to chutz la'aretz. So this says the Stei Chemed, Mikol makom, im rotz l'tzeis kedei l'shtatech al kivrei tzadikim, shari. If you want to leave Eretz Yisrael to go to daven by the kever of a tzaddik, it's mutter. V'harav, he quotes a sefer, Tzalal b'mayim adirim al mahu shenagu ha-kohanim leilech l'shatech al kivrei tzadikim v'lo chayshu l'tumas kohanim. This is a sugi for another time. Shenagu ken ha-rishonim mimraku mimenu midvar v'nilma b'kol shekin inyan seis Eretz Yisrael v'chutz la'aretz. O miYerushalayim Eretz Yisrael t'shari te'efshar lomer d'v'chi ha'yleika isura klal. This shita holds there's no isur at all. Kevin shedaito lachzor dumya. If you go to the kever of a tzaddik outside of Eretz Yisrael and you have intention to come back, so there's no problem. And maybe there's a mitzvah to daven by the kvarim of tzadikim lahagein aleu, k'mashikasu b'kalav, what we see by Kalev ben Yefuna. Umihu dafka k'sheino mispatel b'osam hayamim me'avodas Hashem. Says the Stei Chemed. This is the key. That's only if you are not going to be mevatel in avodas Hashem. If the question is, should I go to night singing? Should I go to a chavrusa? Should I go to a shir? Should I go to a minyan? Or go to Kivrei Tzadikim? It's pashut that does not override those things. If it means missing a seder, taking a kid out of yeshiva to go to Kivrei Tzadikim, so that is not a mitzvah that's going to override something else that's obviously a full-fledged mitzvah. If you are mevatel mitzvahs of Hashem and avodas Hashem, if that's the case, you wouldn't have to daven for days at a time. Especially if somebody's a Talmid Chacham and they learn seriously. So, and he learns, he's not going to have learning for a chodesh or yamim or lo yafa osim. Hashem should forgive such people. Harav Sada Aretz, and he quotes the Sada Aretz. And he says, I think he's correct. Myself, I know this is how I conduct myself. I don't go to Kivrei Tzadikim if it's going to mean missing out on learning in Tefillah. A person who's learning all day, 100%, he should not be mevatel from his learning at all. So he continues in this line of argumentation, saying that maybe after it is a mitzvah to go to Kivrei Tzadikim, but not in the face of Torah and Avoda and actual mitzvahs that we can fulfill. Rav Kook has a tshuva in the Mishpat Kohen in Siman Kuf Mem Zayin. Rav Kook is writing Hagos comments on the Stei Chemed, and he argues with the leniency of the Stei Chemed. Now, I want to keep this in mind. Rav Kook wrote this piece before he went to Eretz Yisrael. He's still in Europe. He's a Rav in Europe, and he writes this piece there. And he says, that it cannot be that the grave of every single tzaddik who ever lived is kadosh. It can't be. Because if that's the case, we could spend all day going along to every single rabbi somewhere and grave hopping all day long. It can't be that every single one is of equal stature. He says the Iker Kedusha, the holiest, the real holy graves, are the earliest tzaddikim who lived in Eretz Yisrael. And he says those tzaddikim who live in Eretz Yisrael are more special than tzaddikim who live outside of Eretz Yisrael. So he says, Al Ikar HaMitzvah Yadana. He says, I don't know if there's a mitzvah. Dematzina Rakshi Toelis. It's helpful. It's a nice thing to Kivrei Tzadikim, but it's not a mitzvah. The tzaddikim will ask for you mercy. Al mitzvah minalei. What's the source that it's a mitzvah to go to Kivrei Tzadikim? Ulai kevan shakadosh baruch hu Misavel Tzvasvim Shal Tzadikim. Hashem desires the davening of Tzadikim. In Kein Zeh Gufa Mitzvah She'ivra Tzadikim She'ivra B'Tfil Lasuk Son Hashem Yisparach. Okay, so you're going to cause the tzaddik to daven. You go there. That's a nice thing, but it's not a mitzvah. L'kal v'chomer she'gedolim tzadikim b'misasan v'al piza ulay yishlomer she'al kivrei avosav avosav. By the kvarim of our forefathers and our rabbis, am shukatan b'mal neged tzadik eretz hakadosh hakurim sham. He says they're less stature than the tzadikim buried in Eretz Yisrael. L'kal makom ulay mitoch dekreva datayid yosef gavei. It's a nice thing. We see by going to the kever of Rav Chia, the source for another time. So he says, Nimis sheyesh was a mitzvah yoser gadol. He says, Kivrei Tzadikim in Eretz Yisrael, a big mitzvah. Outside of Eretz Yisrael, perhaps not so much. Mikamako, ein hadavar bar klal la hadavar la'amar to say, shlo taspik avas avos olam yeshnu chavron ad shenitzrach etzeis al zemer self chatzars. He says, I understand. The avos buried in Chavron aren't good enough. You need to go somewhere else. But Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, Adam, Chava, Sarah, Rivka, Leah, they're not big enough for you. You have to go somewhere else. You're going to leave Eretz Yisrael and abandon them to go to somewhere else. He says it can't be. So says Rav Kook, I'm not convinced it's a mitzvah. So maybe it's a good thing, but certainly to leave Eretz Yisrael and go to Kivrei Tzadikim, it can't be. This is a big deal amongst, we have a minute left. This is a big deal amongst Breslov. This is a big deal by Breslov, by Chasidei Breslov. This is a big discussion. How could it be that Breslov Hasidim are going to leave, who live in Eretz Yisrael, are going to leave Eretz Yisrael and go to Uman for Rosh Hashanah, right? As you know, we're coming up on L. L stands for what? Anil Uman v'Yishtil Abayit, right? So how is it going to be that the Breslov Hasidim are going to leave Eretz Yisrael and they're going to go to Uman for Rosh Hashanah? So this is discussed. There's two essays by Rabbi Shammai Morgenstern, who is certainly Gedolei Mashpim of Breslov. He has two essays, one in the Rosh B'nai Yisrael, and another one called the Emes Rashel Ma'avo, where he argues, and he brings countless sources to say that Breslov Hasidim in Eretz Yisrael should not leave Eretz Yisrael to go to Uman for Rosh Hashanah. They should stay, because there's more Kedusha in Eretz Yisrael. But again, those Breslov Hasidim outside Eretz Yisrael, that their minhag stays there as well. So at the end of the day, to summarize, to bring everything together, is it a good thing to go to Kivrei Tzadikim? 100%. Is it a mitzvah? We're not sure, but it's definitely a good thing. And when you go, should you be mamash on top of the kever? No. You should probably stand a few feet back to be choshish for the gra and the arizal. And when you're there, what should you daven? So then that you have to decide for yourself or ask the Rav. Are you going to be davening to a Kadosh Baruch Hu, only not mentioning the tzaddik and just using the Makam Kadosh as a place to daven? Or are you actually talking to whoever is buried there, the neshama should be Melech Yosher, and go and act on your behalf? Okay? Thank you very much.